I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. The rise of pickleball is now a national story. I personally realized the popularity of the sport one day walking my dog. We walked up to the tennis courts in my neighborhood rec center, where my dog likes to find stray balls and run around the courts. But this time, almost all the tennis courts were in use by pickleballers. In 7 years of living in the neighborhood, I have never seen that many tennis players. The pickleballers seemed organized. There were games in progress. The players kept scores seriously. Many others waited their turn to play. The usually sleepy rec center had burst forth into activity, and I had to find out more. Turns out, the takeover of tennis courts by pickleballers is not uncontested. The noise from the wiffle ball type ball they use on plastic paddles, not to forget the swarming pickleballers and their cars, have driven local residents to counter-organize against the spread of the sport. I invited to the show local pickleball coach Emer Daly and Chuck Kynes, the Montgomery Park's planner managing pickleball's fast expansion in the county. Did you know that the reigning national pickleball champion, Ben Johns, grew up in Laytonsville, right here in Montgomery County?
'Cause I thought my worry could save you. I'd wait under the snowbank till spring if I thought the thaw would calm you. But you already got your boots on and you changed your face. No amount of walking is gonna take you far enough away to make it okay.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society moving precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Ammonite, a DC area rock trio bringing jangle and twang to local music. The songs come from their album Demolitions. Erin Frisbee on vocals and guitar, Selena Benelli on lead guitar, and Allison Sina on drums. Ammonite has played the National Museum of Women in the Arts, the T Series, and has been featured by Bandcamp, Country Queer, and several Spotify lists. Their song, Make It Okay, which you are listening to right now, climbed to the top 10 at Alt Q Radio.
Gave up every fight 'cause I thought I couldn't live without you. Let's call it a tie because I'm tired.
In the news this week, once Transurban, the Australian road company, decided to pull out from the 495-270 highway widening and tolling project in Maryland, the movement to stop the highway expansion in southern Montgomery County erupted in victory. The fight had been arduous and personal, and at a time when political victories are hard to come by, The victory of a grassroots movement against a Republican governor wanting to pour more asphalt seemed like David had won against Goliath. But Marilyn Balcombe, the newly elected Montgomery County Council member from Germantown, Clarksburg, and Poolesville, collectively called the Up County, observed that the celebration was undue. Without the highway project, the transportation woes of her constituents remained unresolved. I caught up with her and asked her to explain. Marilyn Balcombe, following Transurban's decision to pull out of the 270-495 widening project, you wrote a pretty tart tweet. Can you say what you said?
Sure. I'll paraphrase. Please, as you are cheering the demise of this project, just don't tell me and my constituents to take a bus because it's not feasible up here. Of course, we need transit, but that's not the only answer. It's not all of the answer. Transit in the Up County doesn't work the way people who live down county think it does.
Do you think that the widening project, as it was focused mainly on the southern part of 270, actually addressed the issues, transportation issues up county?
So we have several transportation issues up county. One of them is the I-270 in the morning and I-270 in the afternoon. Part of the issue with the I-270 traffic in the morning is the bridge. So we do need to fix the bridge, and fixing the bridge would alleviate traffic on I-270 south in the morning. I was 100% in favor of the bridge. The 370 south to the spur, that was not my focus. And there probably could be a better way from 370 to the spur. But the bridge, there's no argument that the bridge needs to be rebuilt with additional capacity. So yes, that piece of the project will help I-270 south in the morning. Doesn't do anything for I-270 north.
Well, so the project, as Governor Hogan had imagined it, was misperceived. I mean, so he wasn't doing anything to alleviate the issues up north, which is really what needed to be alleviated. He was making an argument that he was going to toll the southern part of 270 in order to one day pay for the northern part of 270.
There were lots of things that I didn't like about Hogan's project, but it was a potential solution. And until then, there was no potential solution for I-270. An interesting piece of the toll lanes is that proceeds from the toll lanes would help to fund BRT North. That was the deal with the devil that was made prior to me coming on the council.
That's right. And Mark Corman has said that Governor Hogan, having promised that, did not put 1 cent into any planning process, into any design process for those BRT lines. So it is a deal that was made for nothing.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Not only does the state need to figure out what's happening on 270 from a roads perspective, the county needs to go back and decide what's going to happen to the BRT from the funding perspective. We just submitted a transportation priorities letter to this county, sent our priorities to the state. Both the I-270 project, the BRT project were included in there, but Mark Rail was also on there. And I pushed for Mark Rail to be on there for an important reason, because it's always the fallback For people who don't live up here, it's always the fallback on, well, why don't we just expand MARC? We need to expand MARC Rail. We absolutely need to expand MARC Rail. I've been talking about expansion of MARC Rail for 15 years. Our state legislators have been talking about expansion of MARC Rail for a very long time. But it doesn't happen because the state doesn't have control over the railway. So my view is, let's answer this question once and for all. If it's going to happen, we need a plan, we need funding, we need to figure it out, we need to have a deal with CSX, we need to move forward. If it's not going to work out, if it's never going to work out, we need to take it off the table, and we need to stop people from saying, well, let's just use MARC.
You said that transit doesn't work in up county as down country people think. So we live in a car-centered society, and particularly up county has been built to be car-centered.
Right.
But we can't afford to do that continually into the future. So we now have a moral imperative to fix this carbon impact problem. And if we don't do the kind of things we don't change the very structure of how up county is built, we are not going to solve the problem.
So I agree with you. The issue is that the county made the decision years ago to put significant residential units in the up county, right? The people who bought the houses, I've been here for 28 years, right? When I bought my house, I didn't make the decision to buy a piece of property out in the wilderness and build a house on a homestead, right? The county allowed 600 homes to be built on this, what used to be a farm, right? And then, half a mile down the road, 1,200 houses, and then another 1,200 houses. The county did that. And so the pendulum has swung. Suburbs are the devil, right? But we still live here, and we still need connectivity. And so when we go back to the planning, we have to always keep in mind that Germantown was built with balance, with residential and commercial. So just as we expected massive residential growth that occurred, we also expected massive commercial growth that didn't occur. And so one solution is jobs up here. And for every job in Germantown, it's one less car at the spur, right? So that is part of the solution.
You said that, expanding MARC is difficult, and I agree with you. It seems that Virginia has worked it out. And what is more incredulous is that the CSX lines, the tracks, were built significantly with public money. But after having built them with public money, they still get to control how they are used. But surely, if Virginia can work out an arrangement where VRE can expand significantly, MARC, the Maryland system, should be able to do the same.
I agree. 100% agree.
So why haven't we done it?
Well, I don't know if it's political will or if it's people screaming and hollering for it.
Could it be that Up County has not got served with infrastructure because people are not hollering and screaming as you just described?
That's exactly the reason.
Are you going to have Up County holler and scream now?
Well, I'm going to try, so one of the issues, and this is a long discussion for another day. We don't have civic engagement up here. People don't vote up here. We don't have civic infrastructure. And yes, we're working on that. I consider that to be my third committee. And when I look at the work that I'm doing in the council.
Balin Balcom, Thank you and good luck.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
It doesn't make it okay. That was my mistake. Thinking there was something I could say to make it all That was my mistake.
Emer Daly, Chuck Kynes, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
What is the history of pickleball in Montgomery County? When did it sort of take off like this?
It took off, I would say, around 2018, 2019, big time. But I believe the first courts and some of the original pickleballers in Montgomery County go back to maybe 2010, 2012. I started playing in 2016.
So what were they doing? Where were the courts when they started?
Nowhere. A gentleman, Bill Wiley, he now lives in Annapolis. He's from Silver Spring, I believe. He caught wind of it in a newspaper article, and he ended up setting up a court in his driveway. And then himself, his wife, and a few friends, I believe, hounded the Parks and Rec department. And finally, they came out to Meadowood, which I believe is on the Silver Spring border. And the Parks Department kindly painted pickleball boundary lines straight over the tennis net, which it does in a pinch, but we do prefer our own pickleball nets because they are a different height and a different width. But Bill was happy with that. And a group of those, they started playing. And it took, 4 or 6 years for that group to expand a little bit.
So Chuck, you've been in the Parks department for a long time.
13 years.
So when did Bill Wiley start petitioning you?
Well, he was petitioning Mark Wallace originally. Mark Wallace was a park planner who retired maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And when he retired, I took over pickleball planning from him. So Mark took a lot of the initial request and probably a fair amount of complaints as well early on. And he was the one who initiated the pickleball site suitability analysis that led to a report, not really a report, but recommendations on where we should put more pickleball courts in Montgomery County. That was completed in 2019 as part of a sport court working group.
There's a suitability analysis?
We try to put pickleball in places where there's adequate parking. It's a distance from homes because pickleball is a little bit noisier than other sports, both the social aspect and also the paddle hitting the ball. And ideally, the courts have lights and bathrooms are also nearby. That being said, we did put pickleball at Olney Mill. That was one of the first places where we put pickleball in Montgomery County parks. And we've learned some lessons from that. The courts are a little close to homes. The park is underparked. There isn't enough parking, so there's a lot of overflow parking problems into the neighborhood. But it has become a pickleball mecca for people in the region, not just Montgomery County. It attracts people from all over.
Emer, I want to ask you to please describe the game. How is it played? What is the court size relative to, for example, tennis?
So the court size is actually the same footprint as a badminton court. You could fit 4 courts sort of on a tennis court in its boundary. Now they'd be far too squished together. There wouldn't be enough room between each of them, but you could physically probably just about do that. If you look in Montgomery County, there's tennis courts usually laid side by side. You could comfortably fit 6 pickleball courts. You can play singles. It's not as popular, so most of the time when you're roaming around Montgomery County and you come across pickleball courts, it's doubles, 4 on each court. We use a ball slightly harder than a wiffle ball. The paddles are probably halfway between a ping pong paddle and a tennis racket in size. It's sort of hard. I hate to say plastic because obviously the technology is growing. I have a carbon fiber paddle, but that's the sound that Chuck is sort of referring to. It is a bit noisy. The ball pings off the paddle. So if you have 2 tennis courts that were sitting maybe with a couple of tennis games every few hours, and suddenly you have 24 pickleball players on it playing 6 games of doubles at the same time, it can be noisy. You're hitting the ball over the net just like tennis. There's some weird rules. Scoring can really be the tough thing to learn at the beginning. It's not complicated after you play it for a while, but at the beginning, it's a little tough and tricky to teach.
How do you score? Like love 15, what do you do?
No, it's 0 to 11.
Okay.
It's not so much the scoring is tricky, it's who's serving at what particular moment.
You win points only on your own serve?
Correct. And then when you win a point, you switch positions with your partner, and that's the only time you switch. So just at the very beginning, there's a little learning curve when it comes to scorekeeping.
So who keeps track of all this when you're playing?
Whoever is serving must announce the score loud and clear before they serve, or else the opposing team can fault them.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the people that play the game? What demographic profile, if you have some ideas?
I think it's wildly changed since I even started in 2016. I started teaching in 2018 after playing for a year and a half, and the demographic was 65 plus or minus 5 years, mostly female, at least who would come to take lessons with me. And now I can safely say when I run clinics, it's all over, from a few teenagers that come with their parents, still the older demographic, but plenty of young working people, 30s, 40s. And now I find, why are you here? Why did you come? It's not because, I heard about pickleball from a few of my friends. Now it's all my friends are playing pickleball. I feel left out. I now have to learn.
Geographically, the sport is mainly in mid and up county.
We have it all over the county. Our distribution is pretty good right now for shared courts, which means shared with tennis. We're all over the county, but our dedicated courts are only in a few locations. Right now, we have dedicated courts meaning it's single purpose. Only pickleball players can play on the courts at Seven Locks Local Park and at Bauer Drive Local Park. We have a number of parks that are planned for more dedicated pickleball courts, including East Norbeck. We're hoping to deliver later this year, or later this spring, I should say. But there's a number of other places around the county where we're doing so. But it's a more expensive endeavor to build the dedicated courts. The way we primarily do it is by repurposing existing tennis courts. That's the most efficient and cost-effective way.
Emer, your particular league, how is it? Is it organized geographically, or just anybody can join?
I run my leagues at Westlake Recreation Club. I have an arrangement with them. I have helped promote pickleball at their club, and they have let me use the courts for lessons and leagues. So it's a win-win for both of us. It's in North Potomac. I advertise my ladder league. I run a ladies ladder and a co-ed ladder in the spring. I do the same in the fall. And people come from all over. I have people coming from Howard County.
I'm sure there's a U.S. Pickleball Association or something.
Oh, yes, USAP. Yep.
And what do they do?
Well, they're behind the rule book, referee certifications. They give grants to people who are trying to put in courts or programs in their locality. I'm not too sure if you're aware, there's money is starting to come into pickleball. There's big tournaments, Obviously, it's not like tennis. The last MLP, which was the Major League Pickleball event, there was $100,000 for the four player team that won.
Chuck, you mentioned that you had issues around Olney Mill. What were the problems?
Olney Mill Neighborhood Park, the tennis courts there have 6 light poles. Most of our tennis courts only have 4, and they're very high quality lighting. So not only for tennis, but for pickleball, they're in high demand, those courts. They also don't get a whole lot of leaf litter. So one of the problems with a lot of our courts, they're in wooded areas or near trees, and in the fall and throughout the year, for that matter, there's a lot of litter on the courts, which have to be cleared off. And some players bring their own leaf blowers. And then during the pandemic, all the indoor rec centers closed. So Montgomery County Recreation was offering pickleball pre-pandemic, I think. And then when the rec centers closed due to the pandemic, there was a lot of pressure on parks to deliver more courts outside. Olney Mill was one of the few places in the county where people could play, and it instantly became a magnet, when the pandemic struck, for people to play there. So it was sort of a combination of, it's a really well-designed court, and the pandemic made it a regional destination. And it caused some problems for the neighbors, because it was attracting, dozens of people to play, and then dozens of more people were waiting to play, and it was just overwhelming for a neighborhood park. What we're hoping is that when we start delivering more dedicated courts in the county, including at East Norbeck during this spring, it will disperse some of the use, and it will attract more people to play there instead of at Olney Mill. I think Olney has a high concentration of players, higher than most areas of the county for some reason. And, that's why people are playing there, but they're also traveling from all over.
What is the pushback from tennis people?
David Robinson was a U.S. Tennis Association rep that was on our sports court working group. He actually helped develop the shared court design that we now use throughout our park system, and it's been adopted by the school system. I didn't mention this yet, but the Montgomery County Public Schools has striped pickleball lines on tennis courts on most of its middle schools, I think, by now. And they've actually replaced tennis with pickleball in some of the curricula for physical education.
What is the state of indoor court?
Because the footprint of the pickleball court is a badminton court, that's how it all started. That's where we all started back in 2015, 2016, playing in the indoor rec centers, because the footprint of the court was already there.
And so do you also play in the high school gyms?
It can be, but I believe there are so many rentals of those high school gyms by other clubs. Once-off rentals are difficult, because I did look into it a few years back when we were desperate for places to play.
Chuck, does parks have indoor facilities for pickleball?
We do. We have courts at 2 places. One is the Germantown Tennisplex, which is a public-private partnership. It's a private company that operates indoor tennis and now pickleball facility in South Germantown Rec Park. And they have striped their courts. Montgomery Parks also recently put lines down at Wheaton Indoor Tennis. It's been received with mixed results. One of the requirements of our court design is to have at least 7 or 8 feet beyond the pickleball baseline against the fence on an outdoor court to allow for effective play beyond the baseline. And the Wheaton Indoor Tennis doesn't have that, unfortunately, because of the curtains that are used for the indoor tennis.
Emer, you're also teaching in the rec department right now, correct?
Yes, correct.
How many facilities do they have, the rec department, in the county?
I believe there are 17 rec centers throughout the county, and you could play pickleball 7 days a week in some recreation center in the county. But I will say, on a day like today, if you drove over to your local rec center, all courts will be full and there might be lines out the door. So it is extremely popular, and we're grateful to have the rec centers. And then there are also the city of Rockville have some centers, city of Gaithersburg, where I first played my first game of pickleball. Bower Park, that's a very popular place too, because it has 7 courts, whereas most of the rec centers, county operated, have 3, maximum 4 courts. Now it is played on a wooden floor. You're using a slower indoor ball. So as you would get more advanced in pickleball, and particularly for tournament players, we do not love playing inside in the rec centers anymore. We've become pickleball snobs.
Do you all wear eye protection?
A very, very, very small percentage of players wear eye protection. I think only one pro does. She's actually the youngest pro on tour. She's 15 and she's number 1. She wears it. I personally wear them. And I believe I always mention it on my Facebook page. And I originally got hit straight in the eye in a gold medal match in a tournament. And it's usually not across the net. It's usually a deflection of your partner's paddle. So every so often you do see on the pickleball forums online a nasty eye injury. It's rare, so people aren't wearing them yet. It's not mandatory like in racquetball. But I do tell people at the start of my clinics, a pickleball really won't hurt you. It'll tag you on your body. It'll sting for a minute. But if you do get a square pickleball in the eye, it can have some nasty consequences.
But seems like they don't listen to you.
Some do. No, I'll notice at my club now, and a lot of people have the exact same ones I'm wearing. So I am spreading the word slowly. But no, I would say, gosh, maybe less than 5% will wear eye protection.
I haven't seen anybody. Very few, I should say. I have seen 1 or 2 people, but very few people wearing.
It's smart. It's a smart thing to do.
Chuck, once you started playing, did your appreciation as a planner of the problems of pickleball get better?
Oh, yeah. I learned particularly about lighting at Bower Drive. The original lighting that we had for the dedicated courts was really poor, and we had to upgrade the lighting.
Well, there you have it. So if people have specific problems with particular sites of pickleball, then, have Chuck Hines come and play with you.
Yeah.
We've tried that angle. We got the mayor of Gaithersburg out, I believe, years ago.
Does Judd Ashman still play?
No, I believe a guy called Art Schenk, who's still very heavily involved in pickleball, he sort of led the charge a little with the city of Gaithersburg. When I first started playing, the city of Gaithersburg was leading the way. They were the first to put down courts on either side of the tennis net. Bower Park used to be the place to play pickleball. They ran the first leagues. A lady named Pam Truxell used to head up the open play and run the first leagues in Montgomery County. And unfortunately, the city of Gaithersburg has fallen off the charts. And the city of Rockville ended up taking over and putting out the best things for pickleball players back in 2019. They put in the original 4 dedicated courts.
What happened to Gaithersburg?
I don't know.
Michelle Potter used to be the director of recreation parks and tourism, I forget, or leisure. She retired a few years ago, and there's a new director, Carolyn Mueller, and I'm just not sure pickleball's on her radar.
When I see, a city like the city of Richmond, who now have almost 100 dedicated courts, and they are building facilities specifically for pickleball, because it's a big difference to play on courts that have nice division between each court, a gate into each court. Whereas when you're putting them on established tennis court facilities and you have 6 courts side by side with no divisions, balls flying everywhere, 1 entrance gate, maybe 2 if you're lucky. Ultimately, we want more. Sorry, Chuck.
We are a political show. So let me ask the political question, which is, why is Richmond able to do what Montgomery County cannot?
I assume it's space and price of land. I don't know. Chuck?
Yeah, it's finding the right location to do dedicated courts.
I assume the same cost considerations apply for Richmond as well. But so my question then is, why is it that Richmond makes the choice and Montgomery County does not? What do you think is the difference?
Priorities in the Parks Capital Improvement Program and the Parks Department hearing from the community that they want more.
Well, I'm hearing that the pickleballers have to storm the castle.
I think you're right. I need more time in my day, though, to lead that charge. Obviously, the Parks Department are doing wonderfully to cater for all the social players across the county, and that's super important. But we also have some competitive tournament players that we feel we have to leave the county to find tournaments.
When you travel, are the pickleball people in those other places where they have these beautiful courts, are they better organized than pickleballers in Montgomery County are?
It's organized for people who want to learn how to play and find people to play with. I don't know if Moco Pickleball is so much focused on advocacy, and I think maybe there's maybe some opportunities for Rob and Emer and other pickleball ambassadors or advocates to really rally the troops to demand more purpose-built courts.
I think we definitely rallied the troops back in 2018, 2019, especially that City of Rockville meeting. We had a whole pile of pickleballers show up. I think life gets in the way sometimes. Rob Campbell, my partner of Moco Pickleball, is amazing. He has 2 children. I have 4. So we just have so much on our plate, teaching and everything. I actually have been thinking in the last few weeks about putting something together to storm the city of Gaithersburg with, since that's where I'm from. I just wish sometimes I had more time in the day.
Mundane question. Bookings for pickleball courts that are run by parks are done on active Montgomery, or is the community used for public facilities? How is it done?
We're not yet allowing pickleball players to reserve courts, but we are moving in that direction. Probably later this spring, maybe summer, we'll start doing some of the shared courts.
Okay, so the only way to start playing is to join a league.
I think the best way to start playing is either through some beginner clinics through Montgomery County Rec Department or the City of Rockville. You can just show up, let's say, to Maddie Stepanek Park. It's sort of drop-in, open play. You show up with your paddle and hopefully someone will take you under your wing and show you. However, I would probably take a quick clinic first, because they do like you to be able to serve and keep score minimally. So I myself would never drive to Bauer or Maddie to hopefully maybe get a court with 3 other people. I wouldn't do it.
Well, so what do you suggest?
If I want to play just with a group of my friends and I want to have my own private game like a tennis player would, I will go to one of the more underused courts, and I will bring my own pickleball net that comes in a bag, costs $300, and I will set it up on the shared lines that Chuck is talking about, and I will go to a quiet place that I know most people do not go to, because that's my only way of securing and guaranteeing a court for a few hours. Now, if you don't mind who you play with and you don't mind mixing in with various skill levels, then you go to Bauer Park, you and your pickleball paddle, and you show up, and the system, each park is a little different, but you hang your paddle on a fence in a big line and you'll add yours to the end of the line. And when it comes to your turn, someone will pick up the paddles and go, next 4 on. That's how, Maddie Stepanek Park at the City of Rockville works.
Very typically, what is the cost of beginner lessons?
We charge $40 for 2 hours, and you do not have to bring anything. We will supply you with paddle balls, etc. The county are probably the same. A couple of sessions, I think it's $20 per session. So similar. City of Rockville, similar.
What about the leagues? What do they cost?
My ladder league, for example, I believe it was $60 for an 8-week session. Again, I think it's pretty much on par with the city and the county.
Paddles, beginner paddles.
They run anywhere between $20, and right now you can get one for as much as $300, I believe.
I think we have all the information we need to start playing. Chuck Hines, Emer Daly, thank you for coming on I Hate Politics. Play ball.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can take it 360 degrees. I can feel the heat. You're like a cool breeze, cool breeze. Can't sleep, can't eat, can't think straight. Concentrate to keep my mind off you. I'm floating 10 feet off the ground in orbit just to hang around.
You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. What lessons can we draw from my conversation with Chuck Kynes, pickleball planner for Montgomery Parks, and Emer Daly, a local pickleball coach and founder of the Facebook group Moco Pickleball? First, pickleball may be everywhere and its rise incredible. But politically, they have to do what every other group must: organize, show up, and demand more. And they're doing it. At a February DC Council meeting, pickleball advocates were out in full force, asking for more courts. My wife, Ilana Mintz, was at the same meeting and predicted that there would be more pickleball courts before underserved neighborhoods had their basic needs met, like installing a public bathroom in Ward 8's Oxen Run Park, or turning an abandoned school that was closed in the 1970s into a much-needed recreation center for Ward 5's Ivy City. And wouldn't you know it, just 3 weeks after the meeting, DC's Department of Parks and Rec announced this week that they are starting a pickleball league. Second, the fact that pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the US says incredibly that it is not a youth sport, but one for older folks that is rising so fast. We are aging and need a sport that we can play with aging knees and joints. Tennis, which used to be so much more 10 years ago, has faded as a sport, arguably because it has become excessively professionalized. In pickleball, too, there is tension between pro players, such as Emer Daly, and those who play recreationally. Their demands are somewhat different, and as yet it seems that the amateur game seems to be the more dominant one. This may change as pickleball attracts more professional money. Lastly, there is a lesson in pickleball's political game about what it means to have public facilities in neighborhoods. Whether a tennis court or a pickleball court, a rec center or school, and heck, even a road, these are public facilities paid for by general taxpayer dollars and should not be treated as a privilege reserved for those in the neighborhood. And yet, that is exactly how we feel about our parks and schools and our streets. They belong to the neighborhood, and those outside should have a lesser say in how they are used. We assert a private privilege based incredibly on public spending. There is a whole school of economics that sees education, public education, as a publicly delivered private good. Not the best way to think about the common weal. That's all for this episode. You've been listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from Ammonite, a DC rock trio. The songs come from their album Demolitions. Erin Frisbee on vocals and guitar, Selena Benally on lead guitar, and Allison Cena on drums. You can find them on their Bandcamp channel. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please sign up for updates at our new website, ihppod.org, or email us at ihppod@gmail.com. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics, close to you and to your home. See you next time.